I just have to mention that it seems like it would be impossible for a Research on Tap to bring in more schools and colleges. So I want to talk to you today about my research related to theater therapy and my ideas about refugee hospitality. I'm examining efforts to use theater therapy in refugee settlements, particularly to address sex and gender-based violence. I look at projects that are often grouped under the title Applied Theater that seek to have refugees as creators and performers, sometimes alongside professional actors. These projects are often funded by the UNHCR or other NGOs, and they are adamantly well-intentioned, but they are deeply rooted, typically, in Euro-American understandings of theater and of therapy, understandings such as that it's just simply good to tell a story about an incredibly traumatic experience. These traditions can be irrelevant or, even worse, dangerous in refugee settings, and I believe there is a troubling lack of collaboration between artists, therapists, and health professionals, funders, and experts in culture, gender, and race. So one of the projects that I look at is here, UNHCR's promising practices to help survivors process violent situations. And I want to point you to this last bullet point where the survivors here have become victims, a term that Euro-American activists have rejected, and the participants in this scene are supposed to act out roles and are asked to find alternatives to violence. So there's a troubling implication here that survivors could have found alternatives to the trauma that they experienced. Also, early marriage is equated with domestic violence, and here in the very last sentence, and both have to be treated with tremendous cultural sensitivity. The designation of early versus the appropriate age for marriage differs significantly, and some of the Syrian refugee communities that I've worked with completely reject the label of child marriage. Another example here is life skills through drama, and I want to give you an example of the kind of theater exercise that I'm critiquing. There's a cunning moneylender who has, in a so-called Indian village, told a farmer who owes him money that he will allow the debt to go unpaid if the beautiful daughter marries the moneylender. They reject the option, and he comes up with this plan. I'll put a black stone and a white stone in a bag, and then she's supposed to choose out. If she chooses the white stone, she gets married, and the debt is forgiven. If she chooses the black stone, then the debt is still forgiven, but she doesn't have to get married. So this is the scenario presented to young girls, and then they're supposed to role play what she's going to do. So they come up and they try to find a solution to this problem. And then the facilitator comes in after they've performed, and this is from the curriculum that I'm worried about. The facilitator gives this positive conclusion. "Oh, how clumsy of me," says the girl. "But if you look into the bag for the one that is left, you will see the pebble I picked up." She's dropped the pebble that she picked. The moneylender has put the same color in to kind of just rig the system. She drops it, says, "I can't find it," and then the end of the story is that the moneylender would not dare to admit that he was dishonest and put the same color in the bag. So the girl, this is again a quote from the curriculum, changed what seemed to be an impossible situation into an extremely advantageous one. And I'm thinking as I'm reading about this exercise, and then the moneylender said, "You still owe me the money," and throws dad into prison, and then takes the girl against her will as a bride. And it seems completely ludicrous to involve young refugees, girls, in this kind of role-playing situation. But these are the promising practices. So beyond this kind of uselessness of the performance that I'm looking at, I'm also concerned about the subjectivity or versions of selfhood that are being inculcated in a lot of these exercises. So the life skills through drama, some of the titles of the exercises include assertive communication, self-confidence, and expressing identity, all lesson titles. And I'm arguing that these forms of subjectivity are really rooted in Euro-American notions of what it means to be an agentive, liberated, fulfilled human being. They're not the forms of subjectivity or selfhood that are desired by people everywhere. And in the Western context, these forms of subjectivity have certainly been critiqued as rooted in masculinist, androcentric identity formations. And some have demanded other ways of demonstrating agency and power that are less competitive, less about assertion, perhaps more rooted in collaboration and communities. I worry that when taught to girls in refugee camps around the world, these ways of performing selfhood may actually put girls at risk of further violence. And this is really challenging because I don't want to be suggesting that refugee women are not entitled to agency, but that they may desire different forms of agency than American self-assertion would suggest. And having done my experience of voting today, certainly the forms of self-confidence and assertion that I'm seeing on our political stage don't make me feel so great. So I want to discover other forms of agency, perhaps rooted in moral or religious self-cultivation, an explosion of the proud Western individual. One of the models that I'm thinking about, that I'm obsessed with right now, is this model of hospitality. And one of the most radical forms of this hospitality, I just gave birth 7 months ago, is the pregnant body, the opening of the self to the other, sharing not only sustenance, but one's actual blood with the other. Of course, pregnancy is also increasingly subject to legal definitions and medical invasion that are being monitored by medicine so that childbirth and death migrate from the home, the place from which the host can extend hospitality, to the hospital, where patients pay dearly for a version of hospitality. And here's where I want to get to this afternoon. We, as researchers and teachers of forced displacement, ask for the hospitality of the refugees. We ask to enter and study their camps, their tents, their temporary homes. We ask for their precious time as they answer our questions or fill out our surveys. When the theater troupes or arts therapists or doctors or NGOs or city, state officials or busloads of our own students enter the camps, they request or demand hospitality. And I believe the refugees very much know this, in my experience, as they bring out tea and cookies and become hosts to the visitors. Thank you.